It's Elkins Movie Club. Elkins Movie Club. It's Elkins Movie Club.
It is indeed time for El Kent's Movie Club. Kent Walgamon of the Lincoln Journal-Star joins us right now. Kent, hello.
Hello.
I liked how Jack began the open as we all were bobbing our heads because I felt like it was a great representation of how he feels about today's movie, which was his pick, Straight Outta Compton.
That's true.
Uh-huh.
Do you want me to go first, or do you want to have some discussion generally first?
So the person who picks the movie does the honors of explaining, of giving like a little background of the movie.
Oh.
So you get to, what's this movie about, Jack?
As somebody who watches our show, I thought you would know that, Jack.
I think he skips this segment every week.
I mean,
Very sad.
That's not true at all.
Mhm.
Okay. So this is a movie that has, as you guys were talking about, it came out, almost 10 years ago now? 2015, and it's based on the rap group NWA. I was born in 1977, so this movie starts in 1986. So this went from when I was 9 years old, and it goes to 95 to when I was 19 years old. So
wow,
a key time in my music life, to be honest. But it depicts the members of NWA, some of whom are notable. You might know. You definitely know who Dr. Dre is. You definitely know who Ice Cube is. You may know who Eazy-E is. You probably don't, unless you're into hip hop, know who Ren or Yella are. But that's the group, and it shows about their upbringing in Compton, how they turned into, how it started, then the trials and travails of success. It's kind of like I don't know, what do you guys call these, like docudrama type things or whatever? I don't know what the right cinema word is for it, but that's essentially what it is. Is that right? Did I do that right, Josh?
Yeah. Kent, is that a pretty good representation?
Yeah. Yes, it is in fact a pretty good representation.
Yeah.
The two things, they obviously made the people that the prominent parts of the story. I mean, Ren and Yella are not hardly in it at all. And there's one guy who was in the first version of NWA that isn't even in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So don't take this to be like all these kind of movies, sort of 100% historically correct. But I think it was, very good movie as well, I thought. And I found I am Jack may not know this, but I am at times try to go back and find what I wrote about it.
Ooh.
And I found this. It was number 9 on my top 10 list for that year.
Really?
Yes. And it was the second music movie. It was previously there was a movie called Love and Mercy that was a Brian Wilson biopic. And so it was like number 4 on my list. So this is what I wrote then. Music movie number 2 on my list is the powerhouse biopic of NWA, the Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, Eazy-E led outfit that brought gangsta rap out of LA's Compton neighborhood to the world before imploding around its conflicting personalities. The picture has some flaws. It slows down in its second half and some inaccuracies, but it's a violent, compelling look at hip-hop reality 20 years ago. And that was 10 years ago. So it'd be 30 years ago.
30 years ago now. God, that's crazy. So, Jack, before you kind of get into some of your critiques, I don't know very much about NWA, so I went into this one fairly blind.
I wondered how much you knew of the story, because I knew most of it.
Yeah, and so I know that Ice Cube is, him and Dr. Dre I mean, what would people refer to them as now? Like sellouts. I mean, especially Ice Cube making kids movies, right? Like I remember that being a critique of him when I was in high school. But I know of those guys, and I know Eazy-E had like a very recognizable voice just because it sounds so different, and they really lean into that. I thought in the first scene, I thought that this was going to be because the talk about it when it came out was, oh my gosh, it's Ice Cube's son playing Ice Cube. And so I thought that this was mainly going to be a movie focused on Ice Cube. And in the end, I think it's more of Eazy-E's movie, I think, than anything, especially at the end. And I knew that he wasn't with us anymore. I could not remember how he died. I couldn't remember if he got killed or if he passed away from something else. And obviously, as he starts getting sick towards the end, you're like, okay, something is going to happen with him. I couldn't remember if it was cancer or something else. I'd totally forgotten that it was HIV. And so going in blind, though, I thought that it worked very well. But like, I know that Jack, he texted me about it. Like, yeah, there's all these inaccuracies. I don't know any of the inaccuracies. So I'm just watching this movie like, this is a really interesting story. Look at all the things that are happening. In a way, Kent, I thought it kind of moved. It's a 2.5 hour movie, and it covers the span of however many years. It kind of has to skip some steps, but you can obviously tell, like, the Paul Giamatti character seems to be a typical scumbag manager, and that's going to result in some, as the thumbs up comes, that's going to result in some fights happening within the group. And I know that Dr. Dre turns into, for lack of a better word, a mogul, throughout his career. So I know that he is not going to be involved. I knew that they didn't last very long. I didn't realize that they didn't last, they barely lasted as a group together. And I didn't know that they tried to get back together or they had talked about it, though I guess I don't know how true or not true that is. So I thought the pacing, I'm with you, Kent, pacing at times, I thought maybe a little poor here and there, but I thought for the most part, I was very engaged in the story. And maybe I went in with lowered expectations because I talked about it with Jack, but I went in like, all right, well, we'll see how this is. And I ended up really enjoying it.
Yeah. I think the reason that it gets kind of slows down is they trying to cover too much ground in the last 30 minutes or whatever. I don't know exact number, but it goes and it's going to go here and here and here and here and here, and there's no cohesion to it, right? I think that's part of the reason that it slows down. What I can tell you is I have a very good friend, and she's a publicist in LA. Her name is Phyllis Pollock. She's actually an Omaha native, and she did all those rap groups. Okay. She is a publicist for like NWA. She's a publicist. She is a publicist for Ice-T. There was one, Ice-T was in Omaha once during, this is really going off the rails.
No, this is great. I would love to hear this.
Ice-T was in Omaha. He was going to do a show, I believe, at the Ranch Bowl. And it was during the time of the 2 Live Crew controversy, and the fine Omaha prosecutors went after Leona's records up there and busted him for selling a 2 Live Crew tape as obscenity. And so Phyllis was part of working against that. So I go up, they have a press conference up there, and then Phyllis like, what you doing? And I'm like, I'm going to go, Ice is playing, come out here. I spent an hour or two riding around Omaha in a limo with Ice-T before.
That's awesome.
I was hoping something like this was going to happen.
Incredible.
Amazing.
And I've also I talked to Mr. Cube when he was doing the kids movies. And I also interviewed Dr. Dre when The Chronic came out, and he did a show at the Civic Auditorium Music Hall.
Amazing.
That's so badass, Kent.
When you interviewed Ice Cube, did you call him Mr. Cube?
No, I did not. No, I don't think I called him anything. He was actually really fun to talk to, but I will be truthful. We digressed deeply into Raider talk, and
that makes sense.
Much.
It's probably a better time to talk about that, I would guess.
Actually, based off of that, I think we can kind of pivot into this. Based off of what I've seen Ice Cube in, I thought his son did an incredible job.
He was awesome.
He was
portraying him. Okay, so that's what I was going to ask. When you watched it, were you like, oh, that's just Ice Cube?
Yeah, he was great, and he looks just like him.
It's incredible.
Really does.
I mean, he looks
Especially I
almost
thought before he cut his
exactly-
hair. When like the early scenes, it's like wow, it's a spitting image.
Yeah, he looks just. No, I thought he was good, and I think thought the kid. I can't remember his first name. Last name is Mitchell. That played Eazy-E.
Jason,
my cousin. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Jason, good. Yeah, Jason. Yeah. Hey, have any of these actors, the ones who played the main roles of the guys in NWA, have they had any other? Would I have seen them in anything else?
Young Ice Cube has been in several other films.
Okay.
And the Mitchell kid, I believe, has. The rest of them, I don't really remember so much.
Our family's big in entertainment, so that doesn't surprise me.
All right, Jack, let's get to critiques. I want to hear about this because you seemed very frustrated by this movie.
Yes, I was. And so I turn it on and people are going to think I'm nitpicking. People are going to think I'm being a jerk. But like I said, this was during my, not that I was growing up in
years.
Not that I was growing up in Compton. I was growing up in East Lincoln, which is a very different experience for the most part. But
the main streets.
There was a lot of cultural. Well, I wasn't in East Lincoln then. I was in a little bit more being a part of Lincoln then. But there were a lot of kind of the cultural things going on at the same time too. The movie opens with Eazy-E, and he's going to do a drug deal, and the first thing you see is his White Sox hat. Okay, right? Mm-hmm. You guys remember this? And it's 1986. They show it. They say it's 1986.
Oh, I know what his problem is.
He is wearing a White Sox hat that came out in 1991. And I know that sounds. Listen, I know how dumb that sounds, but guys, that White Sox hat, I remember the week it came out in June. It was such a big deal among kids when that logo came out. I remember.
Hey, Jack, real quick. The hat that Dr. Dre wore throughout much of the movie, it's a black Dodgers hat.
I got more. Don't worry. I'll get to it.
Logo, they didn't have hats. So I noticed.
There's way more.
Like they didn't have hats like
that. It's all over the movie. It's a mess. It distracted me throughout the entire. They finally got to the mid-90s, and I was like, well, you were acting like you were at the mid-90s from the beginning with the costuming, with everything. I realized, listen, 1986 didn't look the same as 1994. It didn't. And I didn't get to feel like I was watching a movie in 1986. No, the biggest reason was all of the mistakes with the sports paraphernalia. The baseball caps, did you see what they all had on the back of them? A Major League Baseball logo. Nobody had that in 1986. That didn't exist. That got unveiled in 1992. You know why? You know why I know that? Because that was a huge deal when that happened. By the way, nobody was wearing fitted caps then either. None of those guys were wearing fitted caps there. They were wearing snapback hats then, I promise. They also weren't wearing them low down like that either. In 1986, they were wearing them like that if they weren't wearing a Kanga cap. Nobody wore baseball caps like that in 1986. They wore them like that in 1995, not in 1986. What was this one scene? They had, I think it was Ren. He's wearing, in 1988 in the movie, he is wearing a Dodgers custom basketball jersey. Do you think a Dodgers basketball jersey existed in 1988? It did not.
Probably not officially.
Ice Cube was wearing a black on black Dodgers hat. Yeah. A black on black. That was sorry. That was Dre. That was Dre wearing a black, and that was one you could see the new era logo. I was like, come on, man. Yeah, that's like 2013 when that hat is from.
What do you think of that mistake happening over and over? Because what I honestly am thinking of is, Jack, I thought that the critiques were going to be more like storylines.
I got more of those too, but yeah.
But you know what I think of, Ken? I think of Mad Men and how the creator of that show, Matthew Weiner, took such time and care to make sure everything was like the true, authentic self of 1960, 1961, etc. This movie definitely operated fast and loose in that regard.
My guess is that it had everything to do with how it was made and who made it. Mm-hmm. F. Gary Gray is the director. And remember, if you looked, all of those guys signed off as executive producers or whatever. So you had a lot of cooks in the stew. And Suge Knight was on the phone threatening the director, right?
Yep.
He was charged with felony threat.
Mm-hmm.
against the director, and the only reason he didn't go to trial for it is because he pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and they dropped the charge, but it was part of the 3 strikes you're out. So Shug's in prison for another 30 years, 20 some years because of that. But that it was as chaotic as you might expect. There was an attempted drive-by out when they were shooting the thing in Compton.
Wow.
Yeah, it was utter chaos.
Okay, so maybe the hat logos weren't of the most concern.
Yeah, getting the exact hat was not their concern.
Let me make my case though, Kent, and you know this as a Raiders fan. The part of why NWA had appeal then and why they had so much influence is because of what they wore and when they were wearing it. I mean, goodness, you guys have probably all seen that ESPN 30 for 30, right? On it was about the Raiders and clothing and all of it. Like there was a real clear time when a bunch of that changed and they drove a bunch of all of that. And then they've got Ice Cube wearing a black LA Dodgers hat in 1988. Like they didn't start making alternate colored baseball caps till Spike Lee asked for an all red one in the World Series in 96. Like those were, God, I just could not concentrate. And again, I know I'm going to sound annoying. Or he's wearing a black Kings hat in 1988. They didn't go to black and white until they got Gretzky, which was a year later. So, or that fall at least. So it drive me. I could not get over it. But it wasn't just that. It was just the feel. It was the way some of the costuming. Suge Knight in 1988 in the movie, like he looks like Suge Knight in that we all know him looking like. He didn't look like that. You know, this Suge Knight was a replacement player for the Los Angeles Rams in the strike season of 1987. He's a Ram. He's on John Bishop's team. And you want to go watch him play? He got hair. He's got a bunch of hair. But that's not what they made him look like, the Suge we know.
Speaking of John's watching. He says Jack was the continuity director on Empire Strikes Back. He was the one who correctly ID'd that the rebellion didn't wear beige in their uniforms until Return of the Jedi saved the movie. Jack, what did you think of the plot? Or did you find it all so distracting that you couldn't even really
I was glad when they got, so I'm the opposite of Kent. Like I found the second half to move more quick, better and be more compelling, but that's because there were less of the airs then because they made the whole thing as if it had been in the 90s. So once I got to 93, although they had Tupac in the studio doing a song that came out after he died in 96 that he didn't do when he was with whatever. Nobody cares. But that was inaccurate too. No, but I thought the second half was I thought the second half was better, but it was distracting to me throughout much of it. And I think it's interesting, that I know I think it was just Dre and Ice Cube who were executive producers, right? From the group.
Eazy-E was dead.
Well, so. I know, yeah, I know that, but the other
difficult for him to.
It was just interesting that kind of made him the main character in the second half of the movie to some degree, and I don't know, like I thought they made him look, and again, it's a bit fictionalized with all that thing, but you could tell it was their opinion of him, right? It was not his opinion of him or the reality of it. I thought they made him seem a lot more pathetic kind of than I remember him being during that time.
What Phyllis says, and she was there for pretty much all of this, is that it's a lot of the portrayals are pretty accurate, but some of the stuff sort of is out of order of how it happened, and that Heller was actually worse than what was portrayed in the movie, and he really was the cause for the whole thing blowing up because they wouldn't pay Ice Cube, and Heller shoveled all the money first to Easy and then mostly to himself because he ended up screwing Easy down the road too. And so that part was, how do I want to say? I thought Giamatti was good playing this guy, but that guy was even worse than the way Giamatti played him, which is really saying something.
I was
Yeah.
going to ask you because Kent, when we did the Elvis movie, of course, the Tom Hanks character, that was a large portion of that discussion. And in these types of movies, the manager can always be a scumbag. And so I was wondering, like, did this exaggerate it? But you would say it's the opposite. They could have gone even harder.
Yeah, Phyllis says it's the opposite. So
wow,
Whoa.
That's crazy. Did the scene when they sang "F the police" and they were told, like, did that unfold the way that the movie portrays it to have happened?
Not exactly, but close enough.
Wow.
Now the movie makes it look like he wrote it in direct response to something.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, he had already sort of had the basics of it and then completed it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Mhm.
I
For sure.
wish
Yeah,
movie.
Go ahead.
I wish the movie would have showed kind of Ice Cube's transition from writing music into starting to write movies, because like
there's
they
that
kinda
one
went-
scene where he's writing Friday,
There's that
right?
scene where he's writing Friday, but it just kind of happened, There wasn't any
Right.
like, oh,
I'm on page 100.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, I think that word processor used was from like 1999 in that one, but nonetheless.
Gosh.
Jack, maybe you missed your calling. You could have been on the set of a variety of movies.
If anyone is making songs or movies involving music and sports gear
Clothing.
from like circa 1985 to 1999, that's my area. I could
know-
definitely do that.
John made the joke about it earlier, but there actually is somebody who works at Disney who's in charge of keeping all the continuity in Star Wars.
Oh, yeah, it's very important.
So when they make a movie, they go down the list. That's just Jack for 90s movies.
Yeah, Charles said, I'm with Jack on all of this.
Like, I can't believe Dre and Ice Cube let it go. I honestly can't. I just can't believe that they didn't see all that stuff and be like, man, that just doesn't look right. I wanted it to feel like 1986. It never did. I wanted it to feel, other than the Jerry curls, right? Like, they got that right.
Yeah.
How much of it was possibly just specifically new era brand marketing
you can see now
or
it would.
product placement?
Oh, that's an interesting question. My guess is it was more out of like budgetary reasons. Like, right, Kent? Like, if you're going to make a hat like that from 86 or 88 or whatever, and it doesn't have the logos, like, you're going to have to construct the hat or digitally alter it. And either way, we're talking about
They did
making
that.
something or
Well,
removing something.
This is pre-digital altering.
Right.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have had that
But-
technology would have
Guys,
been in its infancy at that time.
they did
No, I'm
that.
saying when they made it in 15. I'm saying the direct, like when they made it. Are you saying that they couldn't have done that even as
Yeah,
directors?
that's what he's saying.
Done it in
Yeah.
Oh man, that's crazy.
Josh,
so
they did that
had to
with-
recreate everything then.
They did that with that Raiders hat that they're wearing throughout the script Raiders. That's
Mhm.
not a real one of those. I can tell you that did not look right. Something looked messed up about it. Like, we're getting super deep. That one actually would have been timeline appropriate if it was a snapback, but like maybe there were some fitted ones, but it looked a little jacked up. They obviously tried to remake it and it wasn't quite right. But I did want to say one thing I did like. Okay. Like,
okay.
one of the parts I really enjoyed, and even the ones that I know were fictionalized, I did like kind of the cameos of where the intersections of these other artists that now kind
like
of
Snoop
came.
Dogg.
Yeah, when
Like,
Snoop Dogg
did such a good Snoop Dogg.
And that was before Atlanta, so this was one of his earlier roles.
Yeah.
that scene, when Snoop Dogg first gets in there, and you sort of, it takes a while because you kind of realize what's happening, right?
Mhm.
And then the one Dre starts playing the notes
That
of
was-
Nothing But a G thing.
That was awesome as he's trying to figure it out because it's I'm trying to figure out that word. It's like an uncanny valley for a moment where you're hearing that song and you're like, those notes are wrong.
Yeah.
And then you're excited because you're like, I can't wait for him to actually get to the notes that I know.
Yes.
And then it does, and it's like, oh,
That was.
that was really cool.
I thought those were great scenes.
Right
Yeah.
before he actually hit it, I'm like, it's coming next.
It's very
It's gonna
close.
happen.
It's very
gonna happen.
close. It's very close. Yeah, that was cool.
I love that music a lot.
It's awesome. That era of hip hop is great.
Everybody always has the East Coast versus West Coast bias. I've always liked the way the West Coast sound was
Yeah.
better because it was just more of a vibe.
Yeah.
I mean, the lyrics obviously were about very real things, but the
Mhm.
way the music was produced
And how it sounded.
and how it
Ken,
sounded.
were you a West Coast guy or an East Coast guy?
Well, I was just going to say that for some of us, I guess in the middle of the country, if nothing else, I understand the split, but as far as the music, like let's just put it this way. I interviewed, went to see all that, Run DMC, Public Enemy, DJ Jazzy Jeff, and the Fresh Prince before anybody knew who Will Smith was. And also Dre and, NWA never came around here, but and a couple of Dre's proteges, and then a little bit down the line, Mr. Snoop Dogg, who I've seen multiple times. And and then Ice Cube played the arena here, 2 years ago, something like that. But yeah, so that split has sort of been almost mythologized in a way for, those were clear in some areas, but for some of us, I think it was just this new this generation of hip hop and here's the important thing I think about NWA, and part of why they made the movie is the NWA is really the group that introduced or that brought a large white audience to hip hop. Public people, the white kids from East Lincoln were not listening to Public Enemy. It was too Afrocentric and too hard in that political kind of sense. The kids in East Lincoln or West Omaha or wherever you want to put it, NWA pulled them in with all of the stuff, the look, but also the content was more of that gangster, what do you want to say? Almost mythological.
Mythologizing.
I mean, here's the other thing about it. Having lived in that era, the West Coast stuff, the NWA, and then basically into the Chronic. People in East Lincoln, West Omaha, like they saw those. There was a little radio play for the Chronic, right? Everybody I know had the Chronic CD. Some people had the NWA stuff, right? But the East Coast stuff at that time just didn't get the distribution to places like Lincoln and Omaha through radio. Like, we didn't know. I mean, we heard about the Wu-Tang Clan a little bit, but they weren't playing Wu-Tang Clan on the radio, man. They weren't playing Nas on the radio. It wasn't until Ready to Die comes out in 94. That's when the East Coast finally hit sort of the mainstream in East Lincoln. But 90 to 94, that West Coast stuff was front and center for people who were teenagers at the time.
In part, that's because it was being pushed by Interscope Records.
Yep, I bet.
And Interscope was the key to that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that this does do, I think, is show that how that West Coast, so to speak, hip hop developed, right? By not just NWA, but of course Tupac comes in, Snoop comes in, and they were, the thing people don't remember now. Remember, Snoop had a song, Murder Was the Case They Gave Me. Snoop was as controversial as you could have got. He was,
and now he's so mainstream. He's on the
so wild.
He big
every television ad you see.
It's funny.
I think
the biggest brand turnaround in history.
It's wild, man.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, it's not only him. You guys referenced it before, Ice Cube's movies. Now, I mean, goodness sakes, Ice-T is doing commercials for some reverse car mortgage situation that they're playing on, on cable news right now for old people to see. And Dre is obviously, he's very mainstream with all this business interests. So,
well, Ice-T has been on what is it, NCIS?
NCIS forever.
Oh, is he on a different show now? Because he was on SVU for years. Is he on another show now too?
I don't know. I don't watch it, but
whatever, one of those.
And then you've got if you look, all of these things, and they all are rooted in that. They all come out of that, which is, I find, I mean, Dr. Dre, you know how he got ultra rich is the headphones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Apple then paid $1 bazillion for his stuff. He's, that, it's a American success story of its own, that this is the first chapter in a way.
Yeah.
Mhm.